guys, welcome to my channel. I'm Ankita. As you can tell from the title, today I'm going to talk about all the classics that I've read so far this year. Here are the classics in no particular order. The first book is The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. In this book, the narrator tells us that when he was a boy, he used to make illustrations and share them with the grown-ups. But the grown-ups never really interpreted his illustrations correctly, simply because they lack the imagination that the narrator possesses. The narrator also makes an observation that the grown-ups are merely concerned with the matters of money. When the narrator grows up, he becomes a pilot, and one day his plane crashes in the Sahara Desert, far away from the civilization. And there he meets a strange boy who identifies himself as the Little Prince. While the narrator repairs his plane, the Little Prince tells him about the planet that he comes from, what his life was like over there, and how he decides to leave the planet. And from there we are taken through a series of quirky adventures of the Little Prince and how he gains knowledge as he goes through these adventures. The narrator also finds that the Little Prince is able to interpret his illustrations because they share the same level of imagination. By the end of the story, the narrator becomes attached to the Little Prince, and in him he gains a friend. This is a story of what really matters in life, about what true love is and what it is like to connect with others. This book is also a philosophical commentary on the grown-up's dull perspective and sheer lack of imagination. It is commendable how the author takes us on a journey of a plethora of emotions in such few pages. If you're someone who is intimidated by dense text of classic literature, I would highly recommend that you pick this book up because it is only 93 pages and it includes adorable illustrations. The next book is Anne of Green Gables by Lucy Maud Montgomery. In this book, we follow the story of an orphan girl named Anne Shirley and arrives on the Prince Edward Island to be adopted by the elderly Cuthbert siblings Marilla and Matthew, who are actually looking to adopt a boy to help Matthew with the farm work. So when Anne shows up at the farm in place of a boy, Marilla is highly disappointed, but Anne's adorable nature wins the siblings' hearts over. This book is such a delight to read because Anne always manages to get herself into trouble, and it's just funny to follow her story. This book is also filled with pastoral descriptions of the scenic Prince Edward Island and has absolutely wild imagination. This is a story of longing to belong. Also a story that will inspire you to use your imagination to the fullest, and a story of a young girl's expectations as she is growing up. Everything about this book is so heartwarming and lovely. The pastoral descriptions in this book and Anne's love for everything beautiful and pretty in the nature makes this a perfect spring read. The next one on the list is A Study in Scarlet by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. This is the first book in the Sherlock Holmes series. In this book, Dr. Watson has just returned to London from a war in Afghanistan, and he is introduced to the famous consultant detective Sherlock Holmes, with whom he shares an apartment at the famous 221B Baker Street. While Sherlock goes about doing his job without really telling Watson up front that he's a detective, Dr. Watson tries very hard to piece together Sherlock's personality. And because Dr. Watson is our narrator in the first half of the book, we find out more and more about Sherlock through Dr. Watson's perspective. We find that Sherlock is clever, but he's also conceited. Later, when a detective of the Scotland Yard calls upon Sherlock's expertise to investigate a murder of a gentleman named Drebber, we see him apply the science of deduction and analysis to solve his murder. The structure of the book is a little unconventional in the sense that in the later half of the book, the narration moves to third person to reveal the murderer's backstory, which is set in the Wild West of America and includes Mormons, polygamy, and violence, among other motives. What really stood out to me about this book is that even though it was published in the Victorian era, the language in this book is so easy to follow, which suits perfectly well for a mystery where you don't expect dense text to slow the pace. The next one is A Sign of War by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. This is the second book in the Sherlock Holmes series. At the beginning in this book, we see that Sherlock is embarking on a dangerous path because there aren't any new cases for him to work on, and he is struggling from obvious lack of intellectual stimulus. Dr. Watson's concerned for his companion grows, but soon a beautiful young lady asks for Sherlock's help in solving the mystery surrounding the disappearance of her father. This case is more complex and more exciting as compared to the case in A Study in Scarlet. This one involves stolen treasure, treasure hunt, missing person, exciting pursuit, Watson's love interest, and in this one, Sherlock summons the help of a dog named Toby. The backstory of this case is set in the colonial India and Andaman Island. We also see that Dr. Watson's narration gets much better in this book in the sense that he makes keen observations, and you can see the influence that Sherlock has had on his companion. Again, the pacing of this book is quite good, and there is not a dull moment in any of the pages in this book. And the last classic that I've read is Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. In this book, we follow the story of Marianne and Eleanor Dashwood, who are sisters. The story begins with the Dashwood sisters' half-brother John Dashwood inheriting their father's property. So the sisters Eleanor, Marianne, Margaret, who is the youngest, and their mother are left with only a small income. Eventually, they move out of their brother's house to a small cottage in Devonshire. There, the sisters Marianne and Eleanor find themselves falling in love and endure heartbreak at the same time. Although the sisters share a very strong bond, they are both very different. Marianne has no caution whatsoever in professing her love openly in the society. She also mourns with the same intensity as with which she loves. Whereas Eleanor, the eldest sister, is more reserved and keeps her troubles to herself. In the end, we see how the matters of the heart and other relationships in this book are largely based on status and annual income. Although not one of the best novels of Jane Austen's that I have read, this book is still full of wit and humor, just not as much as Pride and Prejudice. So these are the 5 classics that I've read so far this year. I would really like to know if you have read any classics this year that you really liked, and if you have read any of these 5 books. I would like to know your thoughts on these books, so leave them in the comment down below. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to like and share this video with your friends and family, and I'll see you next time. Until then, bye.